Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the EOB podcast. So last weekend, we have the release of 3 movies. We have Dr. Seuss's The Grinch, which is an animated version adaptation of Dr. Seuss's classic children's book. And then we have the action movie Overlord. It is produced by J.J. Abrams. And finally, we have The Girl in the Spider's Web, which is another adaptation. I guess not another adaptation, which is it is another movie that's based on the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. Let's see how those movies did at the box office. Okay, so let's jump right in. Coming in at number 1 is Dr. Seuss's The Grinch. It is the animated version. Back in 2000, we had the Jim Carrey live action version. That movie did really well. It opened to 55 million, went on to make 260 million domestic, and then 345 million worldwide. This new version, animated version, I said could probably open to 30 million because it is not anchored by a big star like Jim Carrey, except this one is voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch and Rashida Jones, Angela Lansbury, and others. And I said, it's another adaptation of The Grinch, and how many versions can you have, right? I guess I was clearly wrong on this one because this movie pulled in 67.7 million over the weekend. Which is way more than my projected 30 million. So I was quite off there. I didn't expect this movie to pull in that much because, hey, it is kind of like an animated version. And I guess the animation is not that great, but, it is good enough. I mean, it's by the same company that did the Minion movies and the Despicable Me movies. I forgot the main line last podcast, but I remember it now. It's the Despicable Me movies. All right. So most importantly, the budget is only 75 million. Which is kind of in line with the Illumination animations. Their movies ranges from 70 to 80 million, and they usually kept the budget as such, right? And they usually pulled in large numbers, and it did, right? 67.6 million opening. Did I say 67.7 million previously? I was kind of wrong there. 67.6 million opening, which is pretty good for an animated version for a movie that only costs about 75 million to make, right? And it hasn't opened that wide overseas yet. Only 13 million of that from overseas for a worldwide total of about 80.7 million. And Christmas season, I mean the holiday season is coming along, so I expect this movie to stay in theaters, because it's mainly targeted toward the children audience, the family audience. Has review-wise isn't that great, 56% on Rotten Tomatoes, but an A- cinema score. So I guess the target demographic loved it, right? Like I say, I expect these holiday theme movies, especially this one, to linger in theaters for a while and over the holiday season. All right, let's move on to number 2, which is Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie about the English band Queen. In the second weekend, it dropped off about 39% to pull in 31.2 million. A movie that I said couldn't do that well because it is about a band, the Queen, and has been a number of years. I thought there might not be people that are, that enthusiastic about a biopic about the band, right? I said the movie could probably pull in 10 to 15 million in its opening frame, right? Open to 10 to 15 million. But it did way better than that, open to about 51 million. Right now, worldwide, it's at 286 million, 185 million of that from overseas, and domestically it crossed the 100 million barrier. So this movie is doing very well. I expect this, judging by the second week and drop off, it's gonna linger in theaters because typically you can tell a movie has legs or not by the second weekend drop, and this one has a very low drop off. All right, let's move on to number 3. Overlord is produced by J.J. Abrams, and it is directed by Julius Avery, who did Son of a Gun with Ewan McGregor, and he is attached to direct the forthcoming Flash Gordon movie. Stars Jovan Adepo, Watt Russell, among others, probably people that you haven't heard of. But this is an action movie. You could say it is a war movie with zombies. It's about a group of soldiers who parachuted in enemy territories, I guess behind enemy lines, and they discover Nazi experiments, a serum which, if it's injected into people, turn them into zombies, with strength, super strength, and what have you. It sounds like the theme, the plot in a video game, and it probably is. So the movie, I said, could probably open to 15 to 20 million because of its action set pieces, and produced by J.J. Abrams, right? I thought it could pull in, open to 15 to 20 million, but it only opened to about 10.2 million. I guess this theme does not appeal to that many people, and especially when it is anchored by, like I said, people that you haven't heard of. So I'm not exactly surprised that it didn't open to my range projection, right? And like I said, I gave it a bump. I gave this movie a bump because of Abrams, right? His name is attached, and I thought, he could sell some tickets. But maybe he did. Maybe people did turn out to watch this movie based on his name and of the action pieces, but not enough interest in this type of movie. Or, at least these actors. I believe it's an actor's problem. Okay, so a 10 million opening, but the budget is only about 38 million. So if it does well overseas, it could probably still pull in a profit. But so far it hasn't opened that wide overseas yet. Only about 9 million of the worldwide box office take from overseas for a worldwide total of 19 million. So it really depends on the overseas market for this movie. It could kind of meet its production budget here domestically, depending on how far it drops off, right? But like I said, I don't see this movie, based on its opening, having that great of an interest appeal to the general audience. It is an R-rated horror, so that limits the box office somewhat. But you never know, right? Because it has 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's kind of surprisingly well reviewed. B Cinema score. So review wise, audience reaction wise, it's there. It's okay. It's an okay horror movie. But like I said, I believe this movie's problem is that it's not anchored by not anyone in the movie, right? There's no star power in this one. All right, let's move on to number 4, which is the Nutcracker and the Four Realms. Huge drop off, about 50% drop off from the previous weekend from its opening frame, to pull in 10.1 million. So far, domestic gross is about 35.8 million, but the budget is 120 million. So what's the problem? I guess poor reviews. B plus cinema score, which is okay. People who saw it kind of thought it was an okay movie, but critics gave it only about 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this movie has an uphill climb to it, right? Because it didn't open that high. I thought the movie could open higher because, hey, of the Disney brand, and it looks good. I said it could probably open to 30 to 35 million, but it opened to only 20 million. And the drop off is 50%, which is kind of high. Doesn't bode well for its domestic box office. Right. Let's see, worldwide it hasn't opened that wide overseas yet, but but it opened wide enough, right? It opened in China already. The foreign take is only 61 million for a worldwide total of 97 million. Yeah, so I think this is one of these rare duds for Disney. It has, all the stars in this one. Keira Knightley, Morgan Freeman, Helen Mirren. Has Les Hallström as the director. So, like I said, it visually looks good, except review-wise, it's poor. The reviews are poor, and Disney pumped 120 million in this movie production-wise, right? The production budget is 120 million, but the results are clearly lacking. And I guess, like I said, it could be the reviews, or it could be the subject matter, like the Nutcracker. It's not a movie that people, it doesn't generate a lot of interest, I guess, from the movie. Or it could be the presentation as well, right? It could be Mackenzie Foy as the lead. It's not that appealing to the general audience, right? Okay, let's move on to number 5, A Star is Born. It pulled in 8.1 million in its sixth weekend. Drop off is amazingly low, 26%. It already grossed 178 million domestically, and worldwide it is at 323 million, 145 million of that from overseas, and the budget is only 36 million. So hey, it is like I say, it's one of the surprise hits of the year. Alright, coming to number 6 is The Girl in the Spider's Web. It is based on one of these books in the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. It opened to 7.8 million. I said this movie could probably open to about 10 million, because the previous movie that stars Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara only opened to 13 million. It went on to make 102 million domestically and 232 million worldwide. And I said, this movie, having a new actor playing the Liz Salander role, probably couldn't outdo what Rooney Mara did in the 2011 movie. So I said this new movie could probably open to 10 million, and I wouldn't be surprised if it opened lower. And it did open lower. It opened to 7.8 million. So and I said that this series, it just doesn't have that great of an impact here. It doesn't have that great of an interest stateside, because hey, if a movie with Daniel Craig, who was kind of at the peak of his career back then, because he was the new James Bond, and Rooney Mara reprising her role, she did 3 movies in this the book series back in I think Scandinavia or something like that, I forget, but in Europe. She reprises her role here, and directed by a well-known director, David Fisher. That movie didn't do that well. At least it didn't satisfy Sony for the studio to greenlit a sequel, and they decided to kind of recast the movie and jump a couple books ahead to similar results, pretty much. So 7.8 million is not good for this movie. I mean, the budget's low, only 43 million, so there might be some life in this one if it did well overseas, but domestically it's kind of a stillborn. And so far hasn't opened that wide overseas yet, with only 8 million of that from overseas market for a worldwide total of about 16 million. Based on the performance of this one, I don't expect to see a new Girl in the Dragon Tattoo or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie, at least not with Sony. Alright, let's move on to number 7, which is the comedy Nobody's Fool, starring Tiffany Haddish. It's a Tyler Perry movie. He wrote and directed this one. It dropped 52% in the second weekend to pull in 6.6 million. Domestic gross so far is 29 million, and the budget is only 19. It's not as big as her previous comedy with Night School with Kevin Hart. But it's not holding on as well as that movie. I mean, it opened well. It opened to about 13.7 million. But the drop off is huge, as expected, right? I mean, when it's said and done, it's going to be okay. I mean, we're probably going to close out at 35 million or so, and then it's gonna off to the secondary markets like video and cable, where it will do well. All right, number 8 is Venom. Pulled in about 4.9 million in 6 weekend. Drop off is about 38% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is 206 million, and let's see worldwide, 677 million, 469 million of that from overseas. Okay, number 9 is Halloween. The biggest Halloween movie in the franchise. It pulled in about 4 million in its 4th weekend. Drop off huge, 63%. 156 million or 57 million domestic so far, and worldwide is at 245 million. Budget is only 10 million. So yeah, we're gonna see more Halloween, and Jamie Lee Curtis, expect her to reprise her role in future movies. Okay, closing out the top 10 is The Hate You Give. It pulled in 2 million in the 6th weekend. Domestic growth so far is about 27 million. Budget is only 23 million, and worldwide it's at 29 million. So the movie is well reviewed with 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, A+ cinema score. It has all the kudos, the accolades. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are going out to see this movie, but it'll probably get a bump come award season. Alright, so that's it for the top 10. Let's move on to the new releases this weekend. We're going to have 3 white ones. We're going to have a Widow, Instant Family, and the new Fantastic Beasts sequel, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Let's start off with Widow. So this movie is directed by Steve McQueen, 12 Years a Slave, who did 12 Years a Slave, starring Viola Davis, Michelle Rodriguez, Elizabeth Debicki, Cynthia Erivo. Liam Neeson is in here, except that he's not doing his macho role, right? Colin Farrell is here, Robert Duvall. So this movie is about those 4 women whose late husband, robbed from someone, took money from someone that they shouldn't have, take money from, right? And now they're out to carry out a heist to repay that money. Yeah, it's one of those movies where, except that it's about men, it's the turn the table and it's about women. Reviews wise, it's currently very good, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Director wise, it's kind of a strange choice because Steve McQueen did 12 Years a Slave. You expect him to produce more dramas, except he kind of did this one, an action movie. He's going commercial with this one. But again, this movie is opening in a weekend where Fantastic Beasts sequel is out. So you expect Fantastic Beasts to be kind of like the juggernaut, the elephant in the room. Is gonna take all the attention, all the box office from the rest of the movies. And you expect this movie to be counter-programming to the spectacle that is Fantastic Beasts. But then again, this is an action movie directed by Steve McQueen. So how well will this movie do? By the name alone, director and all those people involved, right? I expect this movie to have some interest. It's gonna able to carve out a niche for itself based on the names alone. It's well reviewed. That is for the adult crowd. But like I said, it's in a weekend where the biggest movie is Fantastic Beasts. So it's probably going to open to 5 to 8 million over the weekend in its opening frame. Okay, let's move on to Instant Family. Kind of a comedy starring Mark Wahlberg and Rose Byrne. It's about a couple who decided to adopt to start a family. They met a teenager at kind of like a gathering, and they kind of decided to her, but unbeknownst to them, she came with like 2 other siblings. So they adopted 3 kids, 1 a teenager and 2 small ones. And they suddenly have to learn how to become parents. And I guess that's where kind of like the laughs comes in, or so, right? Octavia Spencer is in here. Tig Notaro is in here. It's a comedy, counter-programming to Fantastic Beasts. I don't expect this to have a big opening, like I said, because Fantastic Beasts is here. But like I said, there might be people who might not be into the spectacle that is a Fantastic Beast. So based on that, I expect this movie to probably open somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range. Expect it to be in the lower end of that. Okay, finally we come to Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. It's the sequel to the first movie, starring Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander. Johnny Depp is the villain in this one. It's based on a book by J.K. Rowling's, one book, but I think they decided to stretch this one out, into I believe 5 movies or something like that. David Yates direct. He did a couple of the Harry Potter movies, so he's an old hand in this one, experienced. Jude Law is here. Urza Miller. Zoe Kravitz is here. The first movie opened to about 75 million. It went on to gross 234 million domestic and 814 million worldwide. I expect this movie to probably open somewhere similar, because hey, I guess the first movie did pretty well, pretty good, right? Except right now the reviews are kind of middling. It's only 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. It could go up or down when more reviews comes in, but typically reviews tend to drop as more reviews arrives, right? But like I said, I expect this movie to do somewhat similar numbers to the first movie, or at least opens to similar numbers to the first movie. So 75 to 80 million opening for Fantastic Beasts 2. All right, that's it for this week's podcast. Tune in next week to see how I did with my projections. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.